Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 72 of Rocket Lab Weekly. So, in this week, we have Scott with us. He is the co host of this show. So, welcome, Scott, here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, how was your week in the stock market and in life?
And good overall. Yeah. I don't think we're hitting all-time highs for the portfolio, but I've been adding to a couple of Canadian positions.
Oh,
Hopefully that turns out well. I mean, it's kind of a little bit frenetic with all the tariff talk or whatever, but there are a couple of companies that shouldn't be too affected. Hopefully, ideally. So, how about your week?
it's so
How's
funny.
yours?
I don't dare to invest in non-US because it's also like, when like let's say if I would invest in Sweden, like the Swedish currency compared to the dollar, I think like fell maybe 20% in the last 2 years. So
Hmm.
it's so even if a Swedish stock would have gone up 20% and I would have bought a US stock that stays the same, it would have been the same result for the portfolio. So
Right. Yeah. Good point.
yeah, yeah. So which Canadian company are you looking at? Just very and
One's called High Tide. That one I feel like I know well enough to start talking about. They're a Canadian cannabis company. They take up about 12% of the markets that they operate in. They're expanding legally or into the how do you say the legal side of the U.S., if you will, and
yeah.
into Germany as well. So they've had seven consecutive quarters of cash flow positivity, and their price to sales is something like 0.5 to 0.6. So they just seem cheap.
Jesus Christ.
And their CEO and CFO are both Indian, so they're going to work hard.
Okay, cool. And what's the other one?
The other one I won't talk about quite yet. We can talk offline.
No,
To give a
no
little
problem.
tease, they're space related. I'll put it that way. Not MDA.
Yeah.
But
All right. Cool. I mean, for me, I've been like I'm drowning in work in my company for the next few weeks, and there was so much content that I wanted to make this week, and I just simply didn't get to it. So, yeah, I really hope I can catch up in a few weeks. Oh yeah, and I wrote to Rocket Lab. So we see if we get an interview again after earnings with Sir Peter Beck and Adam Spice.
awesome.
So cool. I think we we start the week by some really interesting news. Francisco Ramirez brought this to my attention that he wrote into Grok about Rocket Lab activities scheduled for 2025, and our weekly was mentioned by Grok as a Rocket Lab event. So I guess we've made it. So congratulations to you guys and everyone. I didn't manage to, I tried to recreate this. I didn't manage to recreate it. So I don't know what he prompted Grok with, but it's still very cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see the comments. Neutron payload user guide. We're definitely going to talk about that one. And there is some. What is Francisco saying? Warning: if you work for the DoD and have a secret or top secret, you cannot invest into cannabis companies. Okay. I don't think you work for the DoD, right? Okay, cool. So let's start the week with Rocket Lab news. So I mean, this one is just to go over what's happening on the week. I don't know how much we can comment on it. So the Varda space capsule that was designed and operated by Rocket Lab is preparing for re-entry. So we are soon going to have a new re-entry done by Rocket Lab. The first one, I believe, was waiting 7 months for an approval.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one is going to go a lot faster. And then it's one more re-entry that Rocket Lab will have under their belt.
Very cool to see, and especially with that such a short time frame. I mean, it only went up not even a month ago. So, even if it's still a month away, that's like a quarter of the duration in space. they had a lot of hangups with that first one though. I think they sent it up before they had the proper paperwork filed, and kind of didn't turn out well for them.
Yeah, they were not expecting that the permissions will take so long. And by the way, the first one was also supposed to be very fast. It's just the paperwork is sometimes harder than launching things into precise orbit and landing them.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay, so then we go to the next one, and that is a new launch. The next launch number 2 for this year, is coming on the 18th of February. That's just in 3 short days. And that will be for BlackSky. And if we keep this pace up, what is the projection for launches for this quarter? I think we spoke about 6. But then we need to really, because so far it seems like we had the first launch, and then 2 weeks later now we're getting this launch, and that's not enough to get up to 6.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me before this one was announced, I'd say that we're not off to a great start. With there's 50 days, and we'll just call it 50 days between Electron 59 and 58. So it was off to a really slow start. We didn't see a single launch in January. Hey, what's up, Matt? And then we now have this first of 5 BlackSky launches just 9 days after the last. So I mean, I'm sure we won't keep up a pace of 9 days in between, but it's definitely closing the gap on what was 50 originally.
Yeah. It's Curtis's favorite company we're launching for,
Yeah.
BlackSky. And hello, Matt. What is up with you?
Not much. Just sorry, I lost track of time, and I was like, "Oh crap, I got to run to see you guys." So hopefully, didn't miss too much. Obviously, you guys were catching up on the launch cadence, but yeah, I'm also was a little bit. What's the word I'm looking for? Disappointed, I guess, in January, but it looks like we're at least getting some movement here in February, and hopefully throughout the rest of the year, it'll kind of keep a pace of once every other 2 weeks or so. That's kind of my hope. Hopefully get us to 24 launches in the year. That's kind of my thought process.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at Curtis. He hates BlackSky, and then he's somehow still ended up with calls on BlackSky, but that's his limit. He's not owning the stocks. That's so funny. Cool. You guys know what I thought about just when the Neutron payload guide came out? I was like, if we are going to have the launch in the mid-year, we soon have to see a Neutron standing on the pad, because we know from our interview with Sir Peter Beck that it's going to stand on the pad for quite some time to do tests. And I don't know, it feels like we're slipping a little bit into I mean, I know we made this bet on the first weekly or something, and I don't remember, but almost no one said June is what they're voting for, but now it really doesn't look real, that date.
Mm-hmm. No, I bet this is Q4 at this point. Q4 or maybe even 2026. I'm not sure. Are you planning to bring up the TD event later in the show?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll circle back to my bearishness on that then later on. But yeah, I don't think I think we're looking more at late 2025 than mid 2025 at this point.
Yeah. Matt, what is your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's a tough milestone. I mean, we haven't gone through March yet, but my thought process was sometime in March, you probably have to start doing some dry rehearsal / a fully integrated test to be able to get yourself in preparation for a June-July lift. So my thought process is at a minimum, you need a month and a half to have a fully integrated vehicle, and it'd be nice to have closer to 2 to 3 months. And so if you don't see one by the end of March timeframe, it looks unlikely. But I anticipate we'll hear more in 2 weeks' time on the 27th, I believe it is, for maybe it's the 26th for Rocket Lab earnings.
My God, Curtis, thank you so much. He has given half a share to all of our babies, and
You're the man, Curtis.
Yes. Okay, cool. So now we go to the next one. And this one, I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit over my head. Who got an award for what? So I don't know if you guys can help me out with this one. So Rocket Lab was featured in the RD100 Awards as a winner for a co-developed Frontier X radio with someone. And the Frontier X is a high-speed X-band software-defined telemetry, tracking, and control X-band radio designed for both near-Earth and deep space missions. I felt like we have to cover this because it's Rocket Lab news, but this could have been in Chinese for me. I don't know if any of you the same.
Same for me. Yeah, sounds good, but I don't know why.
We should get maybe an engineer here because I don't understand this K band and X band and Y band. Oh wait, we have an engineer here, Matt.
Or I mean, I'm far from some sort of some good electrical engineering work. In fact, that was probably the thing I banged my head most on, and I don't even know if you could consider it electrical engineering, but all the different bands are just different frequencies, right? And with that, you have different types of data and stuff that you want to move. Yeah. So, I mean, some of it might be super high frequency, but it might be disrupted much more easily than something else versus X, might be specifically for radio communications or something of the like towards satellites to Earth, right? So you broadcast it through the satellites and beam it back down so you get broader coverage back on the Earth. I don't necessarily know other than different purposes for different bands, right? X band is, for what I've seen, a lot of radio communications versus a Ka, Ku band is more like data transmission to and from Earth. So it's interesting. I like you stated, this stuff goes over my head with respect to what it really is. All I know is that different bands for different things.
Yeah. Well, we have Dave Huntsman to the rescue here. And he says that RD100 is a magazine and their rankings are well respected in the space community. So at least we know it's a good award that brings more respect to Rocket Lab. Sorry, we couldn't break this down more. Cool. We go to the next one. And that one was a very interesting one. Sir Peter Beck held a speech at what was it? The Small Sets Symposium? I forget where he held the speech, where he went into his thoughts about the current state of the space industry. Very interesting listen if you guys want to find out more about his thoughts. For me, the biggest thing that stuck out is that he thinks there is 2 to 3 companies that are going to go bankrupt this year that are launch companies, and he kind of says that because every year there is 2 to 3 going bankrupt. I don't know which one it is this year. When it was going on Twitter, I saw someone mention Relativity, but Relativity just had Eric Schmidt from Google help them out. So I don't think it's Relativity, but we're going to see. So did you guys listen to this, and do you have some nice takeaways?
I think this one's going to be really interesting to circle back to at the start of next year, just to see what all came to fruition. Because Peter did have that whole 2025 section of like what he expects to happen throughout the year. But I do have to point out, and it's not a criticism, obviously, but I feel like so many times Peter was just like, okay, I don't mean this to be offensive. I don't mean this to be confrontational. I'm like, just say it, Peter. Like, be confrontational if you need to be, man. Like, it's the way it is.
I think that's his New Zealand very nice side,
Exactly, yeah. Very diplomatic, yeah.
Yeah. But he basically said, I think one of the parts was that Europe is at least 15 years behind because it reminds him of, sorry, maybe not 15 years, but 10 years. Like it reminds him of
2015 is what he said, yeah.
Exactly. Because that's where governments were funding small launch vehicles, and small launch is not even on the map anymore. Yeah. And I can't remember which was the other one where I think it was the companies going bankrupt was the other one where he didn't want to be offensive.
Look, I think people take offense to it, and it's just the reality of business. We've seen it over the past 5 years so far. It's a trend that I feel like is going to continue. Maybe I think what's more controversial is the fact that some of the ones that will go bankrupt, unfortunately, or have to be bought out or be sold for pennies on the dollar are likely more of Peter's friends and people that he thought might have been able to pull through. But unfortunately, in this case, it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. And even still, it's hard for companies to, specifically in space, get funding, especially if you're not on a path towards profitability. But we will see. I mean, I think that's going to be tough. And it doesn't necessarily have to be big guys either, right? I mean, we've already seen some smaller players start to fan out and not necessarily be as relevant as they once were. So it just goes to show you, it gets you scratching your head a little bit, because towards the latter half of last year, it's really only been the last 5-6 months that we've seen pretty much every space stock go up. And it feels like the pendulum has swung, not just for space, but in general for the stock market in terms of speculative investments. It seems, I think you or somebody else had said it really well the other night, Vince, which is everybody seems to be very risk on. And so, unfortunately, when risk off becomes the trend again, whether there's some sort of black swan or people come to the normalization of their investments and they start to kind of weed out who's actually a big player and who's actually not, and who doesn't actually have any capital to continue to progress, it's going to unfortunately weigh on Rocket Lab, because they're going to be dragged into that space. But we know, just based off the fact that the backlog is somewhat sufficient, and with the capital and the treasury that are on the balance sheet, Rocket Lab will pull through it at least for the next 2 to 3 years, even without getting closer to profitability. So it seems like Rocket Lab's in a good position, but unfortunately, it has to be said that many others are not and are looking for any way, whether it's convertible debt or actual capital raises to get where they need to be.
Yeah. All right. So we'll go on to the next one, and that is the Neutron user guide that came out. Fun fact, I tried to open it for you guys today, and it seems like the link doesn't exist anymore. So I don't know if it's was made confidential or somebody released it on accident, or I'm clicking on the wrong link. But the main takeaways from this is it looks like Neutron grew because it seems to be 45 meter tall. There is maybe a confusion if it's with the legs open or not, because at some point in the document it mentions 43 meters tall. And the next interesting point is that the rocket is cut into 2 modules. You can see it here on the bottom right. I don't know if you can see my mouse going over it. And that's how the rocket is going to be assembled. And this was obviously for the people who would use Neutron, and they need to design their spacecraft, and they need to know technically how to integrate their spacecraft into Neutron. So it's definitely a step forward. Have you guys seen this, and what was your thoughts when you did?
I looked over a little bit of it, just to kind of look at and if there was those changes to the mass, to the lift ultimately. Because if you guys remember, a little while back they mentioned that they shaved a bunch of weight off of each engine, and there was one minor tweak. I can't recall what it was though.
Oh, it was I remember now. It was the return to launch site. I think it went from 8 tons to 8.5 tons. Or something
Yeah,
like
there it is. Yeah, 8.5. Yeah. And then as far as the it was taken down just for some minor adjustments. Jacob mentioned that there's some minor discrepancies, but no text has actually changed. So for whatever reason, they took it down, adjusted the formatting a little bit, but it should be there again under a different link. But yeah, someone smarter than me can explain it. Matt?
Far from smarter than anybody, but it was really cool to see the trajectories of how the first stage would kind of peel off, right, and kind of do like a complete U shape to be able to return to the launch site. And it was nice to see a little bit more granularity. It didn't seem like anything was too surprising. I didn't necessarily get too much of the details about the lifting capability with respect to what was put on there. Just mostly looked at a lot of the graphics, and it looks like to a lot of what we've kind of seen before. And just touching on what Curtis had wrote here, yeah, this is one of the things that I was mostly curious about with Boeing stepping out of kind of launching meat and stuff of the like, and Peter basically stating that he wasn't really in that sort of realm yet, but they talked about how Neutron is certified to potentially go down that path if they want to, and they have the capability of that. They mentioned that in the 2022 Investor Day. And then they mentioned it, I think, when we met either for 2Q or 3Q. I remember asking Peter, and he said, yeah, it's in the cards. They haven't really gone down that path yet. Obviously, they're focusing on specifically getting it on the pad first, and then they can worry about the ladder second. But it'll be interesting to see if that ends up being something that comes in, knowing how Boeing and many other companies have been so much a part of the Archimedes project, or not Archimedes project, I'm sorry, Artemis project. The thought that if some of those guys pull out, it might leave a hole and might be an opportunity for Rocket Lab to get billions of dollars of contracts. Maybe not necessarily in Artemis 1 through 5, but potentially Artemis 5 plus as we look to go from the moon to Mars. Anyway, different story for a different day.
If there is still an Artemis moon program left, we're going to see what happens to that one. All right. We go over to the next one. This is the one that Scotto has mentioned, that Adam Spice was speaking at the TD Cowen. This was one of the things this week that I really regret not getting to. So, Scott, could you tell us what happened on this conference? And, what do we need to know?
I guess my main takeaways was that there are now roughly 2,200 employees, 800 of which are in New Zealand. So this is a 25% increase year over year, and a 0% increase for New Zealand staff. So all of the increase that we're seeing in headcount is pretty much explicitly for, as we can expect to be the American side of things, the Neutron side of things. Adam Spice, he also mentioned that there could be bigger opportunities to work with other friendly nations in creating opportunities for HASTE platforms, which probably comes as no surprise to anybody here. Just more or less confirmation for what we're expecting. So whether that's Australia seems by most likely in terms of where we could expect to see HASTE next, maybe Canada, maybe not with what's going on, but I don't know. There was a mention as well that Adam mentioned that they're now able to begin signing up customers, which I think is interesting, just having customers be plural, because we only know about one single customer for now. So I'm not sure how far along that is in terms of like if we got another one on the books, for example, or if it's just like the early kind of onboarding process. And I guess the last bullet point that I'll touch on is that it's not the first time that it's mentioned, but Neutron is mentioned to be a little bit above $300 million. This was first mentioned, I think, in mid-January, I think it was, that the wallet for that is going to be above 300 million. Usually it was originally announced as 200 million, and then they kind of bumped that up to 250 to 300 million, and now they're saying above 300 million. The last quote was actually between 300 to 350. So that's kind of why I'm leaning towards Neutron being later. I think we're going to see a bit of an extended time frame. And also there was one question, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but well, I mean, actually, there's a couple moments where Adam is a little, I'll say dodgy for lack of a better term, when asked about a mid-2025. Like he just seems to kind of be, it's just like, oh, well, we'll talk about that on the earnings call. So it was just a little bit odd. It's in the Q&A section if anyone's interested, but that's kind of why I'm leaning towards the a bit of a pushback in terms of the Neutron debut.
Yeah.
I didn't have the opportunity to look through it. I did get some notes and I scanned through them, basically the transcript, and I saw a lot of what you talked about with HASTE, and I wasn't surprised. I think one of us, if it wasn't me, talked about it on the 2Q, 3Q check in with Peter and Adam, and so that was one of the key questions we had asked. So wasn't surprised by that piece. And hey, if my thoughts on this, if it's going to come back around, because I think people are going to ask either this week, next week, and even after earnings, I'll just get in front of it. I'm okay with Neutron being delayed. It's still one of the quickest opportunities of medium launch to get to the pad, and especially just knowing the guys, they would delay it not just for the sake of delaying it. They would delay it because it has some sort of massive implication on what they could do and launch a better product from start, right? Because this isn't just like a ring the bell exercise, right? This is basically something where they want to get a product that launches. And it's not to say they're not going to do tweaks, right? There's always going to be tweaks. There's always going to be, but what they can find when they're building this is like, once you get from like an AutoCAD drawing to actually creating a bottoms up actual model and rendition of what you're going to put into space, you're going to find small tweaks here and there that weren't necessarily thought of. And so adding that's going to add time to your schedule. But at the end of the day, if it means that it's closer towards what an actual replica looks like, and if you're starting to want to get to a place where you're landing on launch number one, which shows the reusability aspect of the vehicle, which could hopefully help folks with respect. You have to think some of these companies do still consider, specifically European companies, they consider the emissions when they do a lot of these things. And so if you talk about how you can reduce the emissions associated with rocket building, it might allow some country somewhere to be able to justify going with a Neutron rocket over a Blue Origin, right? If, say, Blue Origin doesn't get to the place where they can't get reusability down, then that might mean that pretty much the only people they can utilize are SpaceX and Rocket Lab, because they have that reusability feature. So just keep in mind, not everybody, unlike America, is pulled out of the 2015 Paris Agreement. And so that's something to also consider as you go into some of these things when you think about emissions and long-term objectives. So anyway, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing if it delays things by 1 to 2, 3, even 4 months, but it means we get a better product in the end. I'm okay for that. The last thing I want is a premature launch on a subpar product that ends up delaying people's trust in the company. And I don't think that that's what Rocket Lab is about. I think Rocket Lab is about solid trust and ensuring that they do what they say.
I 110% agree with what you're saying, because when the stock price was in the 4 and they haven't done the cap call raise yet, and they just had money to put Neutron on the pad, a delay at that time with very bad financing conditions also at that time would have been devastating. But keep in mind that now we're in a different market. It's very easy for them to raise capital. The stock price is relatively high. It wouldn't dilute much if they need to raise capital. And why do an Astra when you can just add a little bit more time and then just do a perfect Peter back launch on a product that works. So I'm also in the current environment that we are in totally okay with the few months delay. Okay, so I think that was, let me just check. I think that was all the Rocket Lab related news for this week, but there was a ton of space news. And I mean, this is also a little bit Rocket Lab related. So Firefly Aerospace captured this movie of them going towards the moon with their, what is it? Yeah, Blue Ghost, exactly. I just wanted to make sure that it's not a Blue Origin name. So Rocket Lab designed the solar panels, the flight software on this program, and Rocket Lab is helping with the navigations. And it's going to land on the moon on the 2nd of March. Hopefully it will be a live streamable, good timing event. It's going to be very, very interesting. And Rocket Lab is going to the moon, as you guys can see. Do you guys have any comments on this one?
No, it's cool to see.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool shot, I must say.
Yeah, that's all I have to say. Is very excited. I think it's an underrepresented part. I think probably the people that are here on the chat and have been with us here for quite some time, we've talked about Blue Ghost and Rocket Lab's involvement with that for quite some time. So hopefully nobody here is surprised by that. But if anybody's new to Rocket Lab Weekly or is just listening in for the first time, it just goes to show the true moat that Rocket Lab is building. You know, even though that it might have a Firefly name tag on it, at the end of the day, Rocket Lab's involved. And it just goes to show, for those people that aren't necessarily truly understanding the moat behind what Rocket Lab is building, a lot of, and I don't know what the recent number is, but a couple of years ago it was almost 50% of all things went into space had a Rocket Lab logo on, and I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers too dissimilar today, especially with the consolidation of the industry. So it just goes to show you that even though we might be focusing on launches, we might be focusing on specific satellites, even something like this has plenty of Rocket Lab logos all over it, and it's going to the moon. And that just goes to show you how much confidence NASA, Firefly, and hell, even SpaceX have in us, because obviously SpaceX is the one that launched the rocket in the first place. So, yep.
Yeah. Guys, I forgot something. My computer crashed just before the show, and I had to redo all my prep work. And I was like, I think I forgot something. But so this news, when you said that almost all the launches have Rocket Lab parts, so there was a contract that was awarded, which some people expected would be subcontracted down to Rocket Lab as it was before by MDA, and MDA didn't renew the contract and instead is using their own in-house built satellite bus, I believe, and they are not even buying any parts from Rocket Lab. This is Globalstar, which is Apple's constellation, if I remember correctly. What do you guys think about this? This feels like a setback.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's good. I mean, it's not good news, because if you guys remember too, past the original 17 satellites, there was an option for another 9. And I mean, obviously those didn't come to fruition. And not only that, but I mean, they just seem to completely cut Rocket Lab out of the picture. And so, Francisco put on my radar too. He said that, like, his interpretation of what might have happened is, I guess I'll give it a bit of pretext as well. For the 17 satellites that Rocket Lab is now building for MDA, who's giving them to Globalstar, right? So Globalstar, it was for $327 million for MDA to build these satellites, who subsidized that to Rocket Lab for $143 million. So what Francisco's take is that they just kind of went straight to Globalstar and were like, hey, instead of leaving all this money on the table, well, on MDA's table, they went directly to Globalstar. And it's worth mentioning as well, Rocket Lab is doing operations for Globalstar's contract as well. So they probably went straight to Globalstar, maybe kind of, pissed off MDA in the process, and MDA is like, okay, you want to play rough? Let's play rough, and kind of pulled out entirely. That's kind of my take / Francisco's take on what might have happened here. But this being paired with the non-continuation of Varda's as well, it's kind of like not the greatest news for space systems, in my opinion.
Yeah. Matt,
I think what people might be looking at is that Rocket Lab is more of a competitor to say MDA, and well, let me just take a step back. I agree with you wholly. I think it's something that I've been kind of surprised to see with respect to Varda not necessarily wanting to launch specifically with Rocket Lab, and then also now you're starting to see these sorts of things kind of come out of play. And my question is it because they're afraid that Rocket Lab is becoming too distant of a leader in the space, and that they think, well, we can partner with SpaceX. They're already way too far ahead, right? But they don't want to partner with somebody who they might have recently considered their peer, who is now far from their peer because of maybe some of the work that they've been given to. But my thought process with this, and whether or not I'm right or wrong, I guess we'll have to pan out and wait, 3-4 years to see this. But I anticipate that they'll go with an MDA, they'll go with somebody else, and recognize the execution ability of what they may have unfortunately left on the table by not going with Rocket Lab. And I've seen this happen before with a great company that I invest called Palantir, where many companies will end up leaving, quoting, "Oh, it's too expensive," or that we didn't want to give them the business. We'd rather go with somebody else. And at the end of the day, they ended up coming back to use that company in particular because, just like we know that Peter Beck and the rest of the gang do, what you say is what you get with Rocket Lab, and they're not going to try to give you some sort of aspirational target. And who knows, that maybe that's why they went with MDA. Globalstar went with MDA. They maybe gave them some sort of aspirational target that they may or may not be able to hit. But Rocket Lab might have been able to say, we can do it for this much, and this is what your target is. I don't even know if Rocket Lab was even given the opportunity to bid for the second Globalstar contract. But at the end of the day, it is concerning, but I feel like it's not due to the lack of capability at Rocket Lab. I feel like it has a lot more to do with politics, because we haven't heard, at least from what I've understood, I haven't heard any negative outputs. In fact, if anything, Apple, doubling down on the amount of contracts that they go, or not contracts, the constellation they're going with Globalstar, in my opinion, is a positive. And so to me, why that doesn't automatically warrant Rocket Lab getting the contracts is maybe beyond me. But at the end of the day, there has to be some sort of politics, and maybe it's a good opportunity for us to ask if we get the opportunity to talk to Adam and Pete in 4Q.
I wrote to them, so it's I don't know yet if we get an interview, but it seems like we might get one. Yeah. I don't know. My theory on it is that it could be that the product, because like we have always considered that the moat of Rocket Lab is that they took these, what does Sir Peter Beck call it, like this 1 to 2 man shops to like scaled production, and maybe when you're speaking about $150 million, like then the companies consider that it's enough capital for them to invest into their own production unit, and even if it like they somehow feel that they can, even if it slows them down, they can make up for it somehow with the margins that they will be making. And then it remains to see, because with Palantir we had something very similar, that Palantir offers a expensive done for you product that that is working, and a lot of companies say that it's too expensive, we can develop our own system, we don't have to use Palantir, and then they have like a 90% failure rate in that. So on the space sector, I don't know these numbers, and it could be that they think it's very simple, we just use the 150 million and we will in-house the whole production line, and then they're not able to make the deadlines, and then maybe they get punishments on the contract for being late, and then in the end it would have been better just to go with Rocket Lab, and then they come back to them. But I don't know if the space industry is I don't know the space industry that much. So as Matt said, it's 2 to 3 years from now, we will see if that is the case. Okay, so we go to the next one, Stoke Space. So this is an up-and-coming launch company. I really like the founder. I'm trying to arrange an interview with him on the channel. So recently they have gotten a major funding of, if I remember well, 250 million. And they are showing milestones that they have reached. So this is their next generation rapidly reusable upper stage engine with integrated metal heat shield. And they are showing some details about it. So my question here is, I feel that developing a fully reusable second stage is insanely hard without having been to space. And I mean, even SpaceX is trying and failing and completely like testing complete different technologies. So do you guys think that this is viable competition? How do you guys judge that they're doing? And what do you think about this milestone?
I mean, Technically and mechanically, I don't know. I've listened to a number of interviews with the CEO, and I like the CEO, but in terms of what's actually like kind of under the hood, it's above my pay grade.
Same with me. Yeah, I think it's too early to tell, right? What I've seen out of their marketing department looks phenomenal, and what I've seen, and it looks like it's really fun. And of course, I think any success within the industry is phenomenal because it only brings more and more competition. And at the end of the day, it's only going to mean more ability to get revenue faster for a lot of people. Because last thing I want is for Rocket Lab, which I don't think is going to happen, but Rocket Lab or any other company to kind of sit on their laurels and say, you know what, we got this figured out. We're number two. We're okay with being number two. And, not feel like there's any kind of competition coming from behind. Obviously we heard Peter talking about how we think there's going to be more consolidation. This seems like a company that's actually doing extremely well and is well capitalized at the moment. Granted, it's privately financed, so I can't really tell only through what I've seen on marketing, but it seems like they have a decent amount of running room before they really have to go back for any capital, and they have what seems to be a working engine. But at the same time, I don't know of a launch date for these guys. I know that they keep talking an aggressive timeline, but I don't know of one personally. They probably have one. I just don't necessarily know. But so, like I said, very, very happy with what I've seen out of the marketing department, but hard to say in terms of competitiveness how close they are towards actually getting a full-fledged rocket or reusability with that as well off the ground. I don't know. It's exciting to see though. I've been really watching their media campaign.
Yeah. I mean, that's also what scares me, that I saw this interview, I think it was Everyday Astronaut he did with Elon Musk. And then he was saying like the heat shield on re-entry from the second stage is not solved yet. And he was like, we have ideas, like we can try this technology and then that technology. So it wasn't like they were iterating like, like with the engine that, you're like, we made it perform 10% better. Musk was like, we don't know if it's going to be this one or like a completely different one or a completely different one. And they have used billions in R&D, right? And then I'm like, how is this company going to shoot for the moon and without having customers, like straight away go into a fully reusable second stage with having the technology figured out by a handful of engineers? And I'm like, okay, if they did it, how come SpaceX didn't manage to figure? And anyway, so I wish them the best of luck. Definitely super interesting company. And the only risk I see with them is like, will they have enough funding to go through all the R&D to arrive at a viable solution where the second stage is fully reusable?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now the next news is some blue mood at Blue Origin. So it looks like Blue Origin is trimming 10% of their staff. And this guy posted some, Blue Origin employees on Reddit. And apparently the morale is very much down at the company. And then the only thing that lifted it up was the successful launch of New Glenn. And then somehow straight after when New Glenn like succeeded to launch, then they decide to fire a lot of the engineers. And also Eric Berger wrote an article about this, that they are trying to reduce. Jeff Bezos apparently has been funding Blue Origin with $2 billion a year, and for a countless amount of years now, and he's trying to push the company into some sort of funding neutral state. So what do you guys think that this means? Are they going to be able to hit their launch target this year? Because some of the employees were saying that maybe New Glenn number 2 is not even able to launch in 2025 because of all these work cuts.
There was this call where they addressed all the company. That call was actually leaked, and what I found odd is he kind of like opened it up, being like, as you all know, we need a major increase to our manufacturing in the you mentioned something to that nature. So I was like, that's an odd way to like start a call about cutoffs. But as far as like not hitting a 2025 launch, actually, there's one tiny little piece of news that we skipped over. It was on Fox Business. Peter had like a 4 to 5 minute little spotlight piece, and he mentioned that the 2 Escapade satellites are set to launch this year.
Yep.
Which I don't understand how. Like, I thought that the Mars window doesn't open until 2026, but and to take that a step further too, like the Escapade, like I thought that Blue Ring, I think that's what it's called, Blue Ring, that was on New Glenn 1,
Yeah.
demo. Yeah, I thought that was put in place of the Escapade satellites because we missed that window. So I don't understand if that's like, if New Glenn 2 is going to be the Escapade satellites now, or if they're, I don't know. And I guess one final point on that is, I think it was myself, but one of us asked Peter and Adam pretty much explicitly, like, what's the plan for like stock-based compensation / headcount once Neutron lifts off? And they were kind of like, it sounded like more like, okay, we'll reshuffle, but we don't really plan to like reduce headcount. Like, you know, because like if you're, I don't know, just to kind of keep the employees on board, like just give them a new project kind of a thing. So just to kind of,
but
like,
you see, it's such a good point that you're raising. It's not apples to apples, right? But Blue Origin, this was their first launch, and the New Glenn, I don't think you can call it a medium launcher. You call it a heavy launcher, no? But my point is that they have 10,000 employees, whereas Rocket Lab, they're preparing the 60th launch, and soon they have the medium vehicle, and they're at 2,200 employees. Because I think it's just, I don't know, like it does, like, I know it's not apples to apples, but I'm like, if the Neutron and the New Glenn is in a similar class, then it's really weird that one of the companies has 2,200 and the other one has 10,000, and the one that has 10,000 has never delivered a payload yet.
True. Yeah.
No, I think when you said the number 2 billion run rate in terms of costs per annum, that was pretty astounding to me. Keep in mind, we're getting closer and closer to profitability. This year alone, fiscal year 24, I think we're going to end up at about 430 to 450 million. I'm meaning Rocket Lab. So you think about it, like you stated, it's about a quarter of the size, maybe slightly less in terms of Blue Origin, but they've been able to accomplish a bit more. So it's pretty interesting to kind of see the capital efficiency, in my opinion, of what they've been able to do at Rocket Lab. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, but to kind of see on a comparison basis how much has been accomplished at Rocket Lab in terms of execution and being able to get a medium launch vehicle up. For a fraction of the cost.
Rocket Lab has not had. Yeah, like Rocket Lab has not had 2 billion in funding in total, not annually. Sorry to cut you off.
No. I appreciate it. It adds to the good conversation, and I think it's very mind-boggling, and it just goes to show. I mean, when you just throw money at a problem, it isn't always a solution, right? And I talk about that a lot at work, personally, at my 9 to 5. Money isn't always the thought about it. Sometimes it's specifically more about how you attack the problem than how much you throw at the problem. So interesting to hear that number. And I know the magnitude's wrong. I know somebody might say, but Matt, it's 300 million or 400 million versus 1.9 billion or whatever per annum. And what it is going to show, and the number is going to be wrong, but the magnitude is probably there, that one company is spending way more than the other and is being able to accomplish, and is honestly viewed as somebody that's, comparable. And to me, you can kind of say comparable, but even still, one of the companies is launched, the number 2 in terms of launch on the western side of the globe, and the other isn't. So, it's pretty interesting to kind of hear the dichotomy of the situation.
Definitely. All right. Scott, did you have anything on this one? Anything more?
No, nothing more. No.
Yeah. Well, that was all the topics that I had for this weekly. I don't know if you guys feel like we missed anything, or some people in the comments, you can let us know if you have any questions before we end off.
One last, I guess, point worth watching is Firefly announced recently that they're ready to launch. That's they're a 1-ton launcher, so it's pretty much Rocket Lab's only American competition. So I mean, it's kind of worth watching. It's their first launch of the year, first launch in I think it's like a couple 100 days. So wishing them the best. But
yeah, can you remind me? It was early or mid 24 that they launched. Yeah, it wasn't and they only did 1 or 2 launches last year, I think.
One launch last year. It was in July.
Yeah.
And that launch apparently went perfect, if I remember well. But then the satellites that they released, the customers were not able to establish communications with the satellites, and then it seems like they were not inserted into the correct orbit, and then they re-entered. I might not remember correctly.
It's ringing a bell, yeah.
But what I remember in their Twitter announcement, because I actually remember this one. They are saying that it's a demo mission, and they want to demo the safety upgrades they have done to the orbit insertion unit, or whatever they're calling it.
Okay.
Yeah. So Curtis has a question. Earnings. So earnings is one more Rocket Lab Weekly away. It's nine trading days away, and I think we go more into it on next Rocket Lab Weekly.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, we all know it's going to be a blowout quarter, and it's all going to be, I think, the fate of the stock price, because I know that's what everybody is interested in, I think, is Neutron, and if that's going to be delayed or not, and guidance on launches and space systems. But I think we are hanging mostly on Neutron.
Yeah, I do think it'll be probably the best quarter to date. Hopefully establishing a consistent over 110 million per quarter sort of run rate as we try to grow closer to 150 to 160. My hope is that we get closer to 200 by the end of next year, which, I don't want to spoil what I'll probably say next week, but my hope is with that, you get closer to a higher backlog as well. I think that's something that scares me. As you get closer to a $200 million backlog per quarter, you're kind of running at about 800 million-ish a year. So, while I don't expect that in the first quarter, nor do I expect that in the fourth quarter of fiscal year 24, it's going to get there, right? Especially if Space Systems continues to grow as they expect it to. So, curious to see with respect to that what shows up for backlog, and but I think the biggest news will definitely be around Neutron. But that being said, I guess maybe it's a topic for next week rather than this week. But are you anticipating on buying a lot more over the coming 12 months, even if the price stays the same or goes down, or is it more along the lines of you kind of have your share count for both of you and you're waiting to just see how it pans out?
I'm more like just waiting personally. Yeah. Just kind of holding.
Yes. Yeah. Same.
Okay. Yeah. I personally still buying, personally, just not as much or aggressively as I was in 22, 23, early 24, obviously. But, every time I get paid, make a huge distinction that I will continue to take some of that money and use it to buy good stocks, and Rocket Lab's in that mix next decade. Venture Global, and what else is bought some more Google and S&P 500. So that's I just can't see myself not wanting to buy more. And in fact, would love to see the stock price dip a little bit. You know, it's like we said, it's a rocket program, for God's sakes, and we can talk about it more next week. But yeah, my hope is that we have another opportunity that I can add a couple thousand more shares. That would be the dream.
Speaking of adding shares, Jacob, sorry, I wrote it down to mention later, and I'll mention it now, but there's a 13F filed yesterday, and Morgan Stanley increased their share count of Rocket Lab by 70%. So,
well, that's pretty good.
So Matt, you're not the only one
Do you
buying.
know how large of a position it was before and what it is now?
I don't have that in front of me. Jacob, you might know. By the way, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jacob. He retired this week on Rocket Lab.
Congrats, my guy.
That's amazing.
4.3 million now, he's saying.
Wow.
So
I mean,
that's what he has, or that's what Morgan Stanley has?
Morgan Stanley share count, I imagine.
Okay.
It's probably also what he had.
Probably. He is Morgan Stanley. He's talking about himself. Yeah.
So he joins Zach on the sorry, I mean fool's gold on the people who retired on Rocket Lab. Yeah,
I have to do some calculations because I have some options. I'm not a millionaire on Rocket Lab shares yet, but it's my closest. So I'm curious to see at what price I would actually become a millionaire strictly off of Rocket Lab. Yeah, that'll be interesting to kind of figure out because I have a couple options contracts that may help. Anyway, interesting. Yeah, I'll have to do that calculation for next week.
Cool.
I don't think it'll be this year, but maybe next year. Or if I get aggressive and add this year, maybe it will be. But still a little bit away.
You need a good dip so you can add.
I would love that.
Yeah.
I need a nice 15-20% dip. I don't want to get greedy and say 30 to 40, but anything's possible.
Yeah. Well, awesome, guys. Thank you for this amazing community, for being with us every week. Congratulations for the retired members.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Thank you for the two co-hosts that also came. And earnings is coming soon. It's going to be very exciting. Next week, we're going to do a deep dive in it. And then it's earnings. So see you guys next week.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Ciao, ciao.